We're going to talk about a bunch of different kind of concepts that can lay down a foundation for how to do assessments of the people you supervise and how to get a foundation for your own supervisory practice. Probably around 10 o'clock or something like that, we're going to be talking about, we're going to shift gears, and we're going to start to talk about a developmental model of clinical supervision. This is the one that I wrote a book about probably 20 years ago. I've written another book about it. And the idea behind a developmental model is a couple of things. One is, and I'm going to be emphasizing this throughout the day, is what's important here is the same thing that's important when you're doing clinical work. You need to develop a good relationship with the people you're supervising. And part of the idea of having a developmental model is you cannot do cookie-cutter kind of supervision. Now, some people do. You know, what they tend to do is they say, okay, do you have a case? Well, do this, do this, do this, do this. Got another case? Do this, do this, do this. This is not supervision. I'll be beating this to death all day long. This is not clinical supervision. Clinical supervision is helping the person figure out for themselves how they need to interact with the client. It's teaching them how to think. It's about helping them develop their own style and helping them to use their own strengths. And so part of what you're trying to help people do is get their own foundation in how they think. What makes this a developmental model is it's kind of like, and I don't mean this in any kind of patriarchal kind of way, it's kind of like being a good parent. And what I mean by that is, one of the things, you've met folks like this, I've met folks like this, where they have trouble making transitions with their kids. You know, you have the parent who's really good with the babies, but now the kid hits 2 years old, and the kid's climbing into cabinets and raising hell, and the parent has a hard time. Or you got the dad who's great with his 8-year-old son, because they're buddies and they go out and do stuff together, and when the kid starts to act up, the dad just kind of picks the kid up and goes, "You're in timeout." But now the kid is 15 years old, and he's 6'2", and he weighs 200 pounds, and the kid acts up, and the dad can't pick him up. And what the dad winds up doing in these kind of cases oftentimes is they start to have this kind of wrestling match down the hall, you know? Get in your room. No, I'm not. You can't tell me to do that. And they start wrestling, and the mom screams, and the cops come. Somebody punches the hole in the sheetrock. The problem here is the dad hasn't changed his style to fit the needs of his kid. We're talking about a developmental model because if you're doing your job well as a supervisor, people are going to change. They're going to grow. And so you need to be able to adapt what you do to what they need. If you're doing the same thing at day 300 that you did at day 1, you're in trouble. Or they're in trouble because they're either going to outgrow you or they're not going to grow or everybody's going to feel stifled. So while we're going to be talking about a developmental model because it's kind of like what parents do. You know, parents I get calls all the time from parents of 13-year-olds who go, "My daughter's going crazy and she's screaming and yelling and falling apart all the time." And knowing that this is kind of not unusual is helpful for parents to understand that. You know, parents love to read those books, your 4-year-old, your 5-year-old, here's what your kid's going to change. If you understand what to expect as people grow and change who are under your tutelage, you can anticipate what you need to do differently. And that's what we're going to be following today. So the second half of the morning, we're going to be talking about, it's a 4-stage model. We're going to talk about the first 2 stages of how do people move through that. After lunch, we're going to come back and do the 3rd and 4th stage. And then after that, we're going to be kind of shifting gears again. We're going to talk about ethics. We're not going to do tons of stuff on ethics, partly because you guys are probably ethic to death and know that. And it's also hard to talk about ethics because a lot of it is so state regulation dependent. Depends on your own state laws. So what applies for Virginia, where I'm from, isn't necessarily what applies for Pennsylvania. But we'll hit the highlights on ethics. And then after that, we're going to be talking more. We're going to talk about group supervision. We're going to talk about new supervisors. We're going to be talking about some management aspects. But again, I want to make this as fluid and open as possible. So whatever you guys want to talk about, particularly this afternoon, I want to make sure we get it covered.